I should have said no. When my coworker Danny first suggested setting me up with her amazing friend, I laughed it off. Blind dates weren't my thing, and Valentine's Day was the last day I wanted to spend awkwardly getting to know a stranger. But Danny was relentless. "She's funny, she's smart, and she's gorgeous," she insisted, nudging my arm. "Come on, man, one dinner. Worst case, you get an awkward story." She had a point. And after a long shift, where I spent most of the night watching couples clink glasses over overpriced steaks, I figured, why not? Maybe I'd surprise myself. That was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 was not asking for more details. The restaurant was a small Italian place in River North, dimly lit with the scent of garlic and fresh bread hanging in the air. It was nice enough to set the mood, but not overly fancy. I got there a little early, texting Danny to let her know I was on board with this ridiculous setup. Then she walked in. Maya. She was pretty in a clean-cut way. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, red lipstick that matched her dress. She smiled, and for a moment, I felt like maybe this wouldn't be so bad. We ordered drinks and conversation started flowing. She was easy to talk to, laughed at my jokes, asked about my job. I told her about working as a server. My weirdest customer interactions, the kind of small talk you expect on a first date. And then things got weird. "You must be exhausted," she said, stirring her drink absent-mindedly. "After last night, closing that late." I blinked. "How'd you know I closed?" She giggled. "Danny mentioned it." That made sense. But something about the way she said it, casual, like she wasn't thinking about it, rubbed me the wrong way. I shrugged it off and asked her about her job. She worked in marketing, or at least that's what she claimed, but her answers were vague. The conversation turned to family, and I told her about my younger brother, how he just started college. "Oh, at Loyola, right?" My stomach tightened. I hadn't mentioned the school. "Yeah," I said slowly. "How'd you know that?" She tilted her head, smiling like it was a joke. "You posted about it? The picture at his dorm move-in? So cute." I stared at her. That picture had been posted months ago, buried in my feed. Something was off. I looked at my phone, trying to think of an excuse to leave. Then she mentioned a local coffee shop I frequented, describing my usual order with eerie precision. I laughed, assuming she had guessed. "I've seen you there," she said. "A lot." That was unsettling. I never noticed her before, but she described where I usually sat, how I fidgeted with my phone when waiting for my order. Then she mentioned my apartment building, the route I walked home after work, the laundromat I used. My stomach tightened. These weren't things Danny would have told her. This wasn't casual knowledge. I tried to change the subject, but she leaned in, resting her chin on her hand, eyes fixed on mine. "You think you're hard to follow?" she said, voice barely above a whisper. "You're not." That was it. I needed to leave. I felt sick. The waiter came by asking if we wanted another round. I shook my head, already standing. "I should get going. Early shift tomorrow." Maya's face didn't change. She just sighed and leaned back in her chair. "I knew you'd try to run." My stomach lurched. I stepped back, nearly knocking into the waiter. "What?" She stood slowly, smoothing her dress. "You always leave places early. Always take the long way home." I tried to keep my voice steady. "How long have you been watching me?" She stared at me like I was the crazy one. "You're overthinking this." I turned and walked out the door, into the street. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone, texting Danny. "Who the hell is Maya?" "What do you mean?" She said you guys were hitting it off. "No." She knows things about me, personal things. What? She knew about my coffee spot, my brother's college. That's weird, but maybe she just saw stuff online? I wanted to believe that. I really did, but deep down, I knew better. A notification popped up. A text. Unknown number. Running doesn't help, you know. My mouth went dry. I turned, scanning the sidewalk. People walked past, lost in their own worlds. No sign of her. No sign of anyone watching. I bolted home, locking my door the second I got inside. For the next few days, I barely slept, until the messages started. At first, they were harmless. You left so fast, I wasn't done talking. Then, you always take 8th Street home, but not tonight. Smart. And then, I'll see you soon. I blocked the number, switched up my routine, taking different routes home, going to a different coffee shop. I thought that was enough, until Danny pulled me aside at work a week later. She came in again, Danny said, voice low. Asked where you were. I told her you had the night off, and she just smiled like she already knew. That night, nothing happened. No more texts. No sign of her. A few days passed, then a week, then 2. I started to believe she had finally given up. Maybe she got bored. Maybe she moved on. I let my guard down. Then, one night, I saw her again. I had just finished a late shift and was walking home, the cold biting through my jacket, and I was almost at my building when I spotted a figure standing near the entrance. At first, I thought it was a neighbor, but as I got closer, I saw the red dress. She wasn't facing me. She was standing still, staring up at my apartment window. My stomach twisted into knots. My first instinct was to turn back, but I was too close. She had to have seen me. I gritted my teeth and walked past, refusing to look directly at her, acting as if I didn't recognize her. She didn't move, not even when I unlocked the door, not even when I slipped inside and bolted up the stairs 2 at a time. Once I reached my apartment, I pressed myself against the door, waiting, listening. Nothing. The next morning, she was gone. But 2 nights later, something else happened. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. A notification. Groggy, I grabbed it and squinted at the screen. Airdrop request, 1 photo. My breath caught. I didn't recognize the name attached to the request, but when I swiped it away, another popped up. 1 photo. Then another, and another. I turned off my phone and lay there in the dark, barely breathing, ears straining for any noise outside my window. But the street was silent. A week later, Danny called me. You're not gonna believe this. Maya wasn't her friend. She had been a regular at the restaurant. One of those customers you barely notice, the kind that blend into the background. She had asked Danny to set us up after weeks of eating there alone. Danny, thinking she was harmless, agreed. Then Danny did some digging. Maya had done this before. She had followed another guy, inserted herself into his life. When he rejected her, she vandalized his car, left notes on his doorstep. It got bad enough that he moved across the country. I reported her to the police. They took my statement, but there wasn't much they could do. No crime had technically been committed. A restraining order wouldn't stop someone like her. So I did the only thing I could. I changed everything. Deleted my old social media and took different routes home every night. And I never agreed to a blind date again. I never heard from her again. But sometimes when I pass a storefront window or glance at a reflection in a train door, I swear I see her, just for a second. Valentine's Day wasn't exactly my thing. My girlfriend, Elena, knew this, but she loved it, so I always made the effort. Fancy dinner, candles, the whole thing. This year, we picked a waterfront restaurant in Miami, a place known for its seafood and live jazz. It was packed. Couples toasting champagne, waiters rushing between tables, the smell of garlic butter and grilled fish filling the air. It should have been a perfect night. But from the moment we sat down, I had this gnawing feeling in my gut, like something wasn't right. At first, I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was the vague tension I felt, like something unseen was pressing in. But then I saw a man sitting alone at a table near the back. Mid-50s, balding. He wore a crisp black suit that didn't quite fit him right, too tight at the shoulders, like it had been borrowed. He had no food in front of him, just a nearly full glass of red wine. But what unsettled me the most was his expression. He was watching us, not casually, not in passing, unblinking, focused. I tried to ignore it. Maybe he was just lonely, spending Valentine's Day on his own. Maybe he was waiting for someone. But every time I looked up, his eyes were still locked on us. On Elena. She didn't notice at first. She was scrolling through the menu, debating between the filet and the lobster risotto. But I was barely paying attention to her. I was too busy watching him. He never checked his phone, never looked away. Just sat there, watching. A waiter passed by and I caught his attention. "Hey," I said, keeping it low. "The guy in the black suit over there, do you know if he's waiting for someone?" The waiter gave a quick look over his shoulder. "That guy, he's been here for hours, ordered one glass of wine, hasn't touched it." I felt a chill creep up my spine. "For hours? Since before my shift started, is he bothering you?" I hesitated, looking at Elena, who was still oblivious to the situation. "No," I said, "just weird." The waiter nodded and moved on. I turned my attention back to the man, but he was gone. The chair was empty. The wine glass, untouched, still sat on the table. I blew out a breath, rolling my shoulders as if I could shrug off the discomfort. Maybe I'd been overthinking it. Maybe he just left. Elena finally noticed my distraction. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just thought I saw someone I knew," I lied. "What are you getting?" she smiled. "Lobster risotto, obviously." I tried to focus on the meal, on Elena's laugh, on the warmth of the restaurant. I kept telling myself it was nothing, but the feeling that something was wrong was only getting stronger. Then the waiter came back. He slid something onto the table right next to my plate, a small folded napkin. I frowned. "What's this?" "It's from that man. He asked me to give it to you." I unfolded the napkin, my pulse picking up as I read the message. "How much? Name your price." For a second, I didn't understand. Then my stomach twisted. I looked up, scanning the restaurant. The man wasn't at his table anymore, but I spotted him standing near the exit, waiting. "Elena," I said quietly, "we need to leave." "What? Why?" I shoved the napkin into my pocket. "I don't like this place. Let's go." She frowned, clearly confused, but she didn't argue. I threw a couple of bills on the table, grabbed my coat, and stood up. The moment we moved, the man stepped forward, cutting us off. "Leaving already?" His voice was smooth, almost friendly. I positioned myself slightly in front of Elena. "Yeah, we are," he smiled. "A shame. I was hoping to make a business proposal." I clenched my fists. "Not interested." He watched me closely. Then his attention shifted to Elena, and that disturbing smirk spread across his face. "Are you sure?" I grabbed Elena's hand and pushed past him. To my relief, he didn't follow, but as we stepped out onto the street, I could still feel his eyes on us. We walked fast, weaving through the crowd of tourists and Valentine's Day couples. I didn't stop until we reached the parking lot, my chest tight with adrenaline. "Elena, get in the car." "What the hell is going on?" she demanded. "Who was that guy?" I pulled out the napkin and handed it to her. She read it. Her face drained of color. "What does this mean?" I shook my head. "I don't know, and I don't want to find out." I started the car, checking the rearview mirror. No sign of him. Still, I drove in the opposite direction of my apartment, weaving through different streets, making sure we weren't being followed. Only when we were miles away did I let out a breath. We never saw him again. But that note still haunts me. Not because of what it said, but because I'll never know what he was actually offering. And what would have happened if I had given him an answer. Valentine's Day was never a big deal for me. I didn't need the grand romantic gestures, the overpriced dinners, or the heart-shaped chocolates. But I did like the idea of doing something meaningful, something different. So, when my boyfriend, Lucas, suggested a late-night walk through an old cemetery in Salem, I wasn't totally against it. He called it a gothic kind of romance. We had been dating for almost a year, and at first he had seemed perfect. Thoughtful, charming, a little intense, but in a way that made me feel desired. Over time, that intensity became something else, a possessiveness that I tried to ignore. He didn't like when I went out without telling him. He questioned my male friends. He subtly guilt-tripped me for wanting space, but I always convinced myself it wasn't as bad as it seemed. He picked me up around 10 p.m. The streets of Salem were mostly empty, the shops long closed. The cemetery, one of the oldest in the area, had an iron gate that was never really locked. Tourists visited all the time, even after dark. "This is going to be special," Lucas said, as we walked between the headstones. The air was crisp, and a light fog curled along the ground, making the gravestones look like they were floating. I tried to play along to find the charm in the eerie setting. We wandered deeper into the cemetery, past the oldest graves, the ones where the names had been worn away by time. The silence felt different here, thicker, heavier. I was about to suggest heading back when I noticed a single bouquet of fresh red roses placed neatly on a grave. At first, it seemed sweet. Some heartbroken lover remembering someone they had lost. Then I saw the note, and my name written on it. A deep, suffocating pressure pressed against my ribs. The card was simple. No elaborate designs, just a plain white envelope, slightly damp from the mist. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside, in neat, careful handwriting, were just 6 words. "So you'll never leave me. Ever." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the cold night air. I turned to Lucas, my breath stuck in my throat as I held up the note. "Lucas, what the hell is this?" He was watching me, his expression blank. Then he smirked. "You like it?" "Like it?" I took a step back, the letter trembling in my hand. "Is this a joke?" He shrugged. "It's poetic, don't you think? Love that lasts forever, even beyond death." My stomach twisted. "This isn't romantic, Lucas. It's terrifying." His face darkened. "Why? Because I don't want to lose you?" I realized then just how deep his obsession ran. This wasn't love. This was control. Possession. "Let's go," I said. "This isn't funny." I turned to leave, but Lucas grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but firm enough to make me stop. "You always ruin things," he said, his grip tightening. "I do something meaningful, and you don't even appreciate it. You left a note on a grave with my name on it. How did you expect me to react?" "This is sick, Lucas." His jaw clenched. For a moment, I thought he was going to do something. But then, just like that, he exhaled and smiled. "Fine," he said. "Let's go." We walked back in silence. Every step I took, I felt like I had to keep him in my peripheral vision. My pulse pounded, every instinct screaming at me to get away from him. But I didn't want to set him off. Not yet. Not here. When we reached the gate, I let out a breath of relief. "I'll take you home," he said. "No," I said, keeping my voice firm. "I'll get an Uber." I couldn't tell what I saw in his eyes. Anger? Amusement? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're overreacting." I didn't respond. I pulled out my phone and called for a ride, refusing to look up until I saw the headlights of my Uber approaching. Only then did I step away. Lucas watched me get in the car, his expression calm, composed, like nothing had happened. "See you soon," he said. I shut the door without answering. I didn't go home that night. I went straight to my friend Audrey's apartment, shaking as I told her everything. She listened, her face growing more horrified with every word. "You need to block him," she said. "Now." So I did, blocked his number, his social media, told my friends, my coworkers. I was done. But Lucas wasn't. Over the next few days, he showed up at my apartment, knocking for hours. He left voicemails, long-winded messages about how I was making a mistake, how he just wanted to talk. Then the text started. Different numbers, different accounts. "You can't just disappear. We were meant to be. You know I won't stop." The final straw came when Audrey called me from her work. "He came here," she told me, voice shaking, asking where you were. That night, I went to the police, filed for a restraining order. Lucas never showed up again. Not at my place, not at work. Just like that, he was gone, leaving behind only the memory of that awful night in the cemetery. For a while, I kept waiting for something. A message, a call, a glimpse of him in a crowd, but nothing ever came. Eventually, I convinced myself that it was over. It's been years, but no matter how much time passes, I still wonder if he's waiting. Dating in the modern age is weird. As a bartender in San Diego, I meet plenty of people, but something about online dating always made me uneasy. Maybe it was the illusion of control, how easy it is to swipe left, to ghost, to assume you know someone based on a handful of curated photos. But after my last relationship fizzled out, I decided to give it another shot. His name was Jason. At least, that's what he told me. He was attractive, well-spoken in texts, and seemed normal, something I was beginning to realize was a rarity. We matched on a Monday, and by Wednesday, we were chatting regularly. He asked about my favorite bars, my dog, even what my ideal Valentine's Day looked like. Harmless. But the more we talked, the more something felt off. His messages came too frequently, like he was always waiting for me to reply. He asked specific questions about my schedule. When I worked, when I got off, where I liked to go after a shift. At first, I chalked it up to standard conversation, but then came the subtle possessiveness. "I bet you get hit on all the time at work," he said. "Must be exhausting." I laughed it off. "Yeah, it comes with the job." "But you don't give those guys attention, right?" Red flag. I didn't respond right away, and he followed up with another message. "I just don't want you around creeps." That was it. My gut told me to stop talking to him, so I did. I unmatched him and moved on, thinking that was the end of it. I was wrong. A couple of days later, I noticed a new follower on my Instagram. No profile picture, no posts, just a blank account. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice, but something about the timing unsettled me. I blocked the account and ignored it. Then, on Valentine's Day, I received a text from an unknown number. "Look outside." I stared at it, confused. A spam message? A prank? Then another. "Happy Valentine's Day, beautiful." I didn't recognize the number, but something in my gut told me exactly who it was. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before a new text came through. "That dress looks good on you." My blood ran cold. I was wearing a dress. That night, at work, right then. I whipped my head toward the entrance, scanning the customers. Couples, a few regulars, no one unusual. My heart pounded. I checked my phone again. Another message. "Smile for me." I didn't. I turned, ducking behind the bar, pretending to check something on the bottom shelf. My hands were shaking. I showed the text to my coworker, Lisa, and she frowned. "You sure it's him?" she asked. "Who else could it be?" She grabbed my arm. "You need to be careful. Seriously." I put on my best customer-friendly smile and nodded, but my thoughts were anything but calm. How did he get my number? How did he know what I was wearing? And then it hit me. My social media. I had been careless. My Instagram was public. Pictures of my dog at the park, drinks at my favorite bar, selfies in front of my apartment building, a photo from that morning in the very dress I was wearing captioned, "Valentine's shift, come grab a drink." He had pieced together where I worked, followed the trail I left online. And now, he was here. My shift ended at midnight. Lisa insisted on walking me to my car, and I was too shaken to deny. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few scattered vehicles. My car was parked near the back where the security lights didn't quite reach. As we got closer, Lisa tensed up. "Is that someone by your car?" I followed her eyes, and my stomach dropped. A shadow stood next to my driver's side door, unmoving. I sucked in a breath. The figure moved just a little, and in the dim glow of a distant streetlight, I saw the grin. "Jason." Lisa let out a low curse and grabbed my arm. "We're not going to your car." We turned and power walked back toward the bar. I refused to look back, but I could feel him watching. The second we stepped inside, Lisa locked the door. "We're calling the cops." I couldn't argue. But by the time the police arrived, Jason was gone. I thought that would be the end of it. But over the next few days, I noticed strange things. A car parked near my building that I didn't recognize. A silhouette lingering at the corner when I walked my dog. A bouquet of red roses left outside my door. No note, no sender, just waiting for me to find them. The texts continued too. Random numbers, short messages. "Why won't you talk to me? You can't ignore me forever." I blocked every number, but they kept coming. Lisa had me stay at her place, and even though I felt safer with someone else around, I couldn't relax. Then, one night, the messages stopped, and that terrified me more than anything. It had been a week since the last text. I had finally gone back home, feeling on edge, but convincing myself it was over. Then around 2 a.m, my phone buzzed. A single notification. A picture. It was grainy and dark, but I knew exactly what it was. My apartment window. I called the police immediately. By the time they arrived, there was no sign of him, but I knew he had been there. I filed another report, locked down my social media, changed my phone number. The police couldn't do much. He hadn't technically committed a crime, but they told me to stay vigilant. I packed a bag and left that night. Lisa didn't even ask questions when I showed up at her place, shaking, just pulled me into a hug and told me to stay as long as I needed. I took her up on it. Days turned into weeks. Every time I stepped outside, I felt like I was being watched. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. I barely slept, jolting awake at the slightest noise. Lisa did her best to reassure me. And then one night, it stopped. No more messages, no more pictures, no calls from random numbers. Just silence. At first, I was relieved, but then relief turned to paranoia. Had he lost interest? Found someone else? Or was he just waiting for me to let my guard down? I wasn't going to take any chances. I never went back to that apartment. Lisa and I searched for a new place together. Somewhere with a security system, somewhere he wouldn't know to look. It took a while, but we found one. A fresh start. A place where I didn't feel like I had to keep my blinds shut 24/7. But even now, I find myself scanning the street. Even now, I hesitate before posting anything online. Because the truth is, he was never just some random guy on a dating app. He was a reminder that sometimes the scariest people aren't the ones lurking in dark alleys or abandoned houses. Sometimes they're the ones who already know exactly where you live. If these stories made you rethink Valentine's Day plans, hit that like button and share with someone who loves a good scare. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. You never know when the next chilling story will drop. Have you ever had a Valentine's date that took a dark turn? Drop your experience in the comments. We're dying to hear it. Stay safe, trust your instincts, and remember, love isn't always sweet. Sometimes it's terrifying. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.